It's Lessons for Life, and we're live. I've got Seb Lopez back with me, spoken word artist, but he wants to kick it off with a quote from someone else. Welcome back, Seb.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite philosophers, the late Terence McKenna, who was a psychedelic icon of the 90s. And this ties in with all the stuff we could possibly talk about, from AI to alien intelligence and the evolution of the mind and the planet. He says, right here and now, one quanta away, there is a raging universe of active intelligence that is transhuman, hyperdimensional, and extremely alien. What is driving religious feeling today is a wish for contact with that other.
Wow. And he was a psychedelic master, you said?
He was a psychedelic icon of the 90s. Like the
Icon.
same way, yeah. You had other people before him, like Timothy Leary, who were the 60s, 70s. Terence McKenna came of age in the 90s, and we used to go see him speak when we were in university, and he inspired a lot of us.
And psychedelic icon, does that mean psychedelic drugs?
Yeah, he was big into that.
Which drugs did he encourage?
He did a lot of mushrooms. DMT especially was his personal favorite. But for me, it's not so much the fact that he was into substances as what this quote seems to suggest, is that human beings, we are tapping into such a minute fraction of the possible information that is accessible to us.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
And he took that yearning to contact the other as being a desire to contact extraterrestrial beings.
Well, you could speak of that other world or that other dimension. You could speak of it as the alienated part of ourself, because we have Western civilization, especially since the Industrial Revolution and all these processes, has become so compartmentalizing or rigidified that our psyche, the greater self, if you want to call that God, the unconscious, whatever, is estranged, is veiled from ourselves. So it's almost like we're just walking in a fog, and there's all this information glimmering everywhere that's accessible to us.
And is using psychedelic drugs a way to enhance that spiritual experience, or is it a form of cheating? Are you just giving the illusion of a spiritual experience?
I think that I don't advocate it personally. It's not something I advocate. I personally choose to. I think that I prefer for myself, and what I advocate to other people is to achieve that level of contact, if you will, through scientific knowledge, through art itself. Art can be a portal to that. So can artificial intelligence. But science, in the greatest sense of the word, science that expands the mind, that decodes the matrix, that is probably the safest and surest way into making contact with that dimension and to connecting with it.
That's interesting. So you're a big fan of an advocate of psychedelic drugs, but you wouldn't use them yourself.
I'm not an advocate of psychedelic drugs. I'm not. Like, I understand that they've had a place in the spiritual arsenal, humanity's spiritual arsenal and heritage. I don't advocate people to use them. I guess what I'm saying is that, like, people have used them and connected to the other, and that's documented. There are many people who will testify to that. But I think the safest and surest way, and the most long-term sustainable way to connect with the other is through science, through artificial intelligence, synthetic intelligence, science. And I think that that's better, in my opinion.
Wow. Well, what about meditation and prayer? The old-fashioned way.
Meditation and prayer. Well, meditation is like a centering mechanism, so that when we center our minds and still our beings, then the spirals of energy consciousness that come up through us are more all-encompassing. They ride a higher vibration, which embodies more of the bigger picture of the universe. So we become more technologically adapted to connect with the outer fringes and the inner rings of universal consciousness.
It's amazing that you equate technology with this spirituality. Most people think they're at odds with each other, but you find a way they can actually reconcile each other.
Yes,
That's
definitely.
amazing.
I think that technology should be used to create more and more and more connections that subvert the limited paradigms in which we're embedded, which constrain us, constrain the potentialities of the whole of the soul, of the collective soul of the planet. Technologies should be used to uncover the potential, release the freedom.
So why not drugs then? Drugs are a part of
Um,
technology, pharmaceuticals.
yes, I mean, if people want to use people could choose whatever whatever path they find that works for them. I
But
personally don't advocate,
what's your objection to it?
because it's not for everyone. Some people fare well with those psychedelic substances. Other people fare badly. And it's kind of like I don't like discombobulation. I don't like, I like to be, I like a gradual approximating approach into the center, into the singularity, if you will, into that epicenter of cosmic consciousness. I don't like to be catapulted, at 100 million miles an hour, and then like that. For a lot of people, that could be a terrifying experience. It could be very disconcerting. So the thing is, I'm a softie. My mind is
Uh,
strong in some ways, but not in others. I like to be in control to a degree.
okay. And also, perhaps if these drugs are a shortcut, much like using steroids in the gym, it will get you strong quickly, but there must be consequences and negative drawbacks, I would imagine,
Yeah,
like
well,
addiction for one.
it's hard to it's hard to qualify, people's experiences. But the thing is that uh, I think that I like to go to slow pace, and then where needed, I accelerate. And I don't want to have any kind of dependency on an external stimulus. Like
Okay.
I want to be. For me, it's like a very organic process. The
Okay.
same way that I would also be suspicious of technologies to be inserted in my brain or this kind of thing. I wouldn't. It's not something that I would embrace on a whim. Like I think a certain degree of skepticism about whatever's out there is very important to go to proceed with prudence, with caution.
Yeah. I don't think many of us want a microchip anywhere near us, but that
Yeah.
might happen. What about astral projection? Is this a spiritual phenomenon that you've come across? Have you ever attempted it yourself?
I know a lot of people who've induced themselves into state of astral projection, but I know that there's been a negative component to that experience, because I think that when you start getting into the occult, into this psychic realm, it's like those waters are so high entropy, or those vibrations are so fast that you can tailspin, just like with substances, psychedelic substances. You could tailspin into like a really confusing and 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 contorting kind of condition, and that's not desirable. I mean, so that's why I don't get into that stuff. I don't like it. I think I don't want to do it.
So you would label something like astral projection as coming under what's known as the occult, which gets a very bad press, but the occult actually just means hidden, right? The hidden knowledge,
Yeah.
no?
Well, I think, like, let me put it this way: if some people know what they're doing, then they should do it, right? I don't know enough about the occult, and it's not really the path that I'm on. But if I think if whatever you do, be informed and do it consciously. I think that whether it's a substance or whether it's astral projection, a lot of sometimes young people would do it just for the thrill of not the novelty thrill. But
Okay.
like these things aren't toys, and you need to do them. If you do them, they're supposed to be done in certain conditions, like controlled conditions, and with certain foreknowledge that you get my point.
And just to conclude on astral projection, this is where people believe that their soul is coming out of their body and they are seeing things happening elsewhere in the world while their
Yeah,
physical
like
body remains put?
the esoteric traditions talk about, like the Gnostics, the Christian Gnostics, whatever. They talk about how like we're basically like an energy field that's connected to all the other energy fields, and so we have multiple bodies. The way there's so many faculties and dimensions which we human beings comprise. We have an intellectual body, perhaps we have a sensorial body, an emotional body, and these fields of consciousness, subtler and subtler, interact
Mm,
with each other, and it's that's some massive high order stuff right there. That's like it's
mm.
very hard to be to it's very delicate, and it's very tenuous, and it's very potentially explosive, and so I just I go slow. I go to slow pace, but at the same time I'm very bent on accelerating my consciousness because I want to expand.
Okay. In the Islamic tradition, there's a story of what's known as the night journey, when the Prophet apparently traveled from Mecca to Jerusalem in one night, which is, of course, physically impossible. But people debate whether this actually happened and it was a miracle, or was it a vision that he had. There are different interpretations of the event, but something happened whereby he traveled either bodily or spiritually to Jerusalem. With a different interpretation, it could sound like astral projection.
Could be. Um, there's a lot of this the mysticism of religion. I think is something really interesting.
Okay.
I I have my own take on what religion is, and I think that Terence McKenna, I'm going to bring him up again because
Yeah.
he had this philosophy that there's an eschaton, or like an end object, a tractor, which
Eschaton,
is,
yeah?
yeah, eschaton, at the end of time, which is
Correct.
attracting all of the physical universe as we know it, which we know as in profane in terms of profane time, and that he thought that in his worldview, that eschaton is like the end of the world as we know it. So the end
So he
of
did anticipate an end of the world.
yeah, he did. He thought that there would be
Mm.
like this kind of that we would find there would be a total apocalypse. Apocalypse actually
Okay.
means revelation. So not a partial apocalypse, but a total apocalypse, where when
Mhm.
he would talk, he would say that we would basically like become connected to the higher source at some unprecedented new level that would make everything
Right.
that came before seem very, very mundane.
Apocalypse could mean end of the epoch, right? End of the age.
But it also means revelation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it the end, or is it this the end of the beginning? Does it go on to something else?
Well, it's kind of like how we speak about, like, people believe that death. Some people believe that death is the end of everything, of
Yeah.
life as you know it. But death could be a portal to another dimension, to heaven, to paradise, to another life. So it's an end and a beginning also at the same time.
Interesting. And did he give any time frame on when this eschaton would occur?
He thought, I mean, it's I think like that, as far as that's concerned, it was very difficult for him to predict when that would happen. And I go through phases in life, like over the years, where I believed that at one point, that I stopped believing it. Now I kind of believe it again, but I'm not sure. And it's actually like, but now it becomes more plausible as a scenario when you start learning about the super intelligence explosion that's going to happen with the technological singularity of synthetic intelligence. So
Wow.
the people talk about a hedonium shockwave, perceptonium, these concepts which hint that there's going to be this massive explosion of consciousness in the future, where the amount of knowledge that, say, is acquired by science, uncovering of physics laws and math laws, the amount of knowledge that takes place within 20 years at the current rate we're going at will be compressed into 1 second or 2 seconds when with the supercomputers and the new technologies. And so people talk about, it's like the future is almost inconceivable. Like we can't even fathom it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure our ancestors couldn't understand the way that we live now. And some of the prophecies in the ancient religions that talk about what will happen at the end of times in the eschaton, as you said, eschatology is the study of the end time. So I recognize the word in that sense. Some of the predictions are so vague, people twist them to try and sort of make sense of them and say, well, that could have meant this. I think every era has had people living who felt like the end is nigh and that this is about to be the end of history. But as you say, we'll always go on to something else, even if death is the end and that's it, and you
Right.
go into permanent unconsciousness. Well, that's still something. Nothing
Right. Right.
is still something. But I would like to go back to the aliens and your idea about alien intelligence being perhaps it seems like a substitute for spirituality. If this McKenna is
I
saying our longing is to communicate with the aliens,
I think
in the
yeah.
Bible we talk about the Elohim, which people translate as God, but is actually a plural form. Could mean gods, could mean beings in the sky, could mean aliens. Do you have an open mind about any of those theories?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a point where all these where consider that there's a hyper realm surrounding us everywhere. All right. You want to call that hyperspace, you want to call that heaven. So what I think that these UFO sightings or um, sort of muses and geni that have spoken to artists and scientists across the ages, I think that other dimensional beings that are spoken of in mystical traditions like Islam, such as the angels or yin, jinn, or like these fire people, all these are, there's a point where all these different dimensions converge as a kind of hyper realm, or as a kind of um, you want to call it the higher, you want to call it heaven or the divine realm, which is calling us, which is like encouraging us to grow towards this end. So, for example, some people are saying now that these UFO sightings that are occurring are the UFOs might be harbingers of the future. They might be AI intelligence, or some kind of intelligence which is injecting these symbols into our perceptual field to make us aware of ourselves, to make us aware that we are connected to the future. And it's a point where future and present coincide in the sort of space-time continuum, which is non-linear, but which is connected at unpredictable points because it's a spiral formation.
So might these UFOs be human beings from a different era? Is that what you're saying? A different time zone?
Yeah, but the thing is, that's why sometimes I start believing in a kind of total apocalypse or a total end of the world. Because the thing is that the only way in which these kinds of symbols make sense to me, these kinds of events, which are so hard to explain, is if we look at a greater perspective and think that there is some kind of unification of consciousness at a future point in time where everything converges and everything stands for everything else, and the universe becomes symmetrically complete, like, and so that we are in a state of complete entropy and fragmentation where we don't know what's going on. There's misinformation, everything is fragmented, and it's kind of it's sort of disconcerting, and it's it's so differentiated. But like, I think that there has to be some point, maybe the world will end as we know it, and then all these kinds of like tangents of logic, these kind of vectors, and these kind of like these things will make sense in the context of a greater unity, like a unified consciousness, which is something that we may attain as a human race. Because, and it may be it may be either we attain that super state of consciousness or we simply self-destruct as a planet. Because as we know, the earthly matrix is being destroyed right in front of our eyes. And so I don't see how we're going to survive unless there's a miracle, unless there's some kind of shortcut to the greater, to a hyper realm, and we escape the earth which is being destroyed by our hands.
And do you mean environmentally? Is we're destroying it? In what sense are we destroying the world?
Yeah, I mean, literally, like the CO2 emissions are so high, and this is causing the greenhouse effect, which is going to melt the ice caps, the tundra, the permafrost in Siberia, and then it's just going to it's eventually going to start to cycle out of control, and the politicians are not going to do anything about it, are they? Like the governments are immobile, they're compromised. People are compromised by their political and economic interests. So there isn't really it's not like anything's going to change unless people are not going to suddenly have a change of heart. The whole system is bunk. It's flawed. So maybe these aliens or the artificial intelligence will help connect us to some kind of higher dimension, which will transcend the earthly matrix, because I don't see how we're going to survive the next 100 years, to be honest, at the rate we're going.
Well, even if we survive the next 1,000 years or 2,000 years, the Earth will eventually be engulfed by the sun as it turns into a red giant and then a white dwarf and then a black hole, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's through our own carbon emissions in the next 100 years or the sun in 1,000 years, life here is temporary. Maybe we can find a way around that. You're sensing that it's very urgent. You're taking on board what Greta Thunberg has been saying. But do you sense that it is our destiny to overcome the end of the world, even if it is by natural causes and not man-made causes? Because everything is temporary. The world will end one day. The physical Earth will expire. Do you believe that mankind could survive that? And is that the ultimate goal? Is that a noble target to achieve?
Well, I think that maybe.
So what? Why does it matter?
Why does it matter?
Yeah.
Well, I think that
why is it important?
I mean, it's important. Like, for instance, it is important, like the destiny of humanity, of human civilization, right? But the thing is that, like you're saying, that everything in the universe is temporary. It recycles itself. Stars die, galaxies die. Physical matter is constantly being recycled. So the same way, I think that the human race, through supercomputers and artificial intelligence, we might be able to recycle ourselves into some new level of some new plane of existence. That might be the only chance for survival, to preserve the human race. The same way everything is, like, information is stored in databases. That might be the only chance for humanity to survive as we know it, because otherwise we would just simply perish. And by the time, I mean, looking from here to 200, 300, 400, 500 years from now, the technologies will enable things that we can't even imagine from this point. So there is hope for the survival of humanity from that perspective.
Are you familiar with George Carlin?
Yeah, the comedian, right?
Yeah, great American comedian. He did one skit where he's talking about the end of the world and nature, and people are worried about the world. And he said, the world's not going anywhere. We are. Nature's going to shake us off like a bad case of fleas, as in humankind probably will wipe themselves out through their own escapades, but there'll be something else. The animals might thrive when we are gone. Even during lockdown, nature was recapturing parts of the country that animals had been driven off, and foxes and badgers and deer were running wild through suburbia. Maybe we are the parasite and we will one day be thrown off. But I sense you believe we have a greater purpose or a greater capacity than that?
Well, I think that like I don't I totally have the view. I appreciate your point of view. I think that humanity, we make too much of ourselves. Like in the greater scheme of
Hmm.
things, we're just like one tiny little point,
Mm.
one tiny little point embedded in meshes and meshes and meshes and meshes of light, of physicality, of galaxies and universes, the metaverse. So the thing is that I think that but we are a part of the infinite continuum of the universe. So for that reason, it would make sense that we would be recycled or preserved and recycled, that nothing is lost, that energy converts into other forms of energy. And so we might be the agents of our own transformation, in the next 100 or 200 years or whatever.
Mm. And in that vast universe, why have we not discovered aliens yet? Or why haven't they discovered us?
Could be that they don't think we're ready or we're not ready. I mean, I don't think that aliens would be very smart, would be very smart to land a UFO on the White House lawn, because human beings were very controlling and were very mistrustful, and
Mm.
the government would want to lock down on that little UFO, and so I think that it's more likely that the UFOs, like other dimensional beings, such as our ancestors, or other like angels or whatever order of beings, are inspiring us, maybe infusing our intellects, our psyches with information, subliminal information, and how there is a connection, there's a symbiosis with alien intelligences, but they won't reveal their identity, only very tenuously, because they know that we're not ready to embrace the idea that we are only one tiny subset among other subsets and sets and sets and sets of sentient beings in the universe, which is what I think.
And are they spiritual beings?
Are the aliens spiritual beings?
Mm.
I There must. I mean, the thing is that like this is a perennial question that human beings we've been asking ourselves for so long. What are aliens like, right? So my guess is that a lot of them are way more advanced than we are. A lot of them are less advanced than we are. Possibly they're more primitive life forms. Some of them may be approximate to us. Um, I wouldn't walk aboard an UFO spaceship if I saw it in the forest. I'm sorry. I tend to be a little bit mistrustful, like a little bit skeptical about. But the thing is that it is encouraging to think that perhaps there are very highly evolved races out there who are acting as guardians to us, maybe, like I said, infusing our thoughts and dreams with inspiring ideas, scientific ideas. And there's even a novel about that called Contact by Carl Sagan, which was made into a film. I saw the film and I just started reading the novel. But in the film, this female scientist, this woman scientist, she receives radio instructions. She's a radio astronomer. She receives instructions through her device, detailing mathematical instructions to build a spaceship to contact the alien race, which is broadcasting to her, in Earth. And it's a beautiful story. And she goes and she has an encounter with this extraterrestrial intelligence. And I think that's the kind of scenario that I look forward to. Maybe these extraterrestrial races, maybe everything we know, all our systems of knowledge and information, are one point in their mosaics, their massive mosaics of knowledge. And they could show us and teach us so many things that we're not even ready to experience yet. And I think, going back to what Terence McKenna said, that thirst for the other, that thirst for the alien, is the thirst for contact with the greater everything, more knowledge, more inspiration, more civilizations. And it's like, it's to me, it's like, it is kind of pitiful how hard we hold on to the paradigms and models that we know and that have suited us, but are not suiting us any longer. And there's a part of me inside of me that wants to be happy, wants to experience joy. My heart wants to be dilated with joy and wants to make contact with everything that's unknown to me. And so I'm constantly trying to invoke that in my thoughts and emotions.
And do you think there is something in our DNA that recalls a past when these beings were here? I'm thinking about you've got South American heritage. I was in Peru looking at the Nazca lines, these images that were drawn in the sand that only when the advent of air travel occurred, people realized that they were spelling out stories from high above. And people said these were images drawn by aliens. Now, I don't know if that's true, but as a local put it to me when I was there, if they weren't drawn by aliens, they were drawn for aliens or some kind of beings that had been visiting that part of the world. And there's many other stories and many other folk tales. They get interpreted differently. You could call them jinn, angels, the daughters of God, bred with men in the Bible. You have the Elohim and the Nephilim. And I think Nephilim means half God. So Elohim, the gods, Nephilim, half God. These were the beings that had interbred with the aliens or the gods, whatever you want to call them. So it's in our psyche, in our folk tales, and it may even be literally in our DNA. And people that believe in evolution have been struggling forever to find the missing link to explain how ape-like creatures became like men. Maybe the missing link is not found in the fossils because the missing link came from outer space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're on a
yeah.
similar page.
I like that idea, and there's even in the Vedas, I think in the drawings there are alien spaceships, and so who knows what interactions our ancestors may have had with other races, and hopefully it'll happen again. Hopefully there will be an intersection between 2 points in the space-time continuum between the Earth, the Earth time continuum, and some other race that may contact us through some conscious means. Maybe not like the UFO scenario, which I think is less intelligent and less plausible. And that would enable us to bump up to another level of evolution. Literally, honestly, like a blessing. Like these aliens could come and show us. They could say, "Look up at the sky. Look at all the levels of consciousness that you missed out on. That will multiply your joy, multiply your perspective, increase your wisdom, and your efficacy in terms of or managing the planet." That would be amazing, and I would definitely welcome that as a positive experience.
That would be a positive. There are lots of religious groups that tend to have a very biased belief in this. I think, for example, the Nation of Islam are anticipating a spaceship that will one day come back to Earth, but it's going to save all the black people and leave everybody else, presumably, to perish. Similarly, evangelical Christians believe in this idea of the rapture, where all the good Christians will suddenly be assumed up to heaven and everyone else will be left to die. But it would be good if there was some kind of uniting phenomenon if we did have an interaction with aliens. I wonder, have you heard of what they call the Blue Beam Project conspiracy theory?
I haven't heard of it.
This is a story that did the rounds quite a while ago now, where some of the paranoid tinfoil hat community, which I am an occasional member of, thought that the government were preparing to stage a false alien invasion, and that would scare everybody into doing whatever they told them. and ushering in some kind of world government tyranny. And a lot of religious people are worried about that as well. So, if something like this does happen, how do we know it's not being used for evil intent?
You have to, like they say, that saying, keep it real, right?
Mm,
So there's a story you ever heard. There's a painting. I think it's called The Naked Truth, and it
okay.
shows this beautiful naked woman coming out of a fountain of water, and she's angry and she's screaming. And the idea behind it is that it's this metaphor,
Mm,
philosophical metaphor, where there's like the naked truth. Sorry, there was two women. I think it was the naked truth and the lies. Two women embodying truth, one embodying truth and one embodying lies. So the lies woman says to the truth woman, let's go sit in the fountain of water. So the truth woman says, okay, let's go. And they sit in the water, they take off their clothes, they're resting in the cool water. And then the lies woman takes the truth's clothes and leaves the truth woman naked in the pool behind her. And then the naked truth woman, now she's completely naked. The truth woman, she's completely naked. She gets angry and she tries to get her clothes back, but the lies runs away. And since that time, humanity looks at the woman who's wearing the lies woman who's wearing the clothes, wearing the naked truth's clothes, and they call that the truth. And they look at the naked truth woman and they call that detestable, and they hate that. So the truth is that history is the process of concealing the truth.
mm,
Human beings, that the egoic mind wants has agendas. It's a carcinogenic. It's a controlling mechanism that wants to put up facades and mask itself. And that's, for me, like the weapon against all of that, the weapon against that in myself, and as far as I can see everything around me, is to burn away the veils, to burn away the clothes, and just get to the naked truth, and strengthen the naked truth, and fortify the naked truth, and learn to maneuver with this woman, this beautiful woman, because a lot of people can't deal with her, and they're not ready to deal with her, and they need to cover up everything up with articles of clothing. So it's this kind of like negotiation. But I think that in the end, the truth will win. When the truth that's in us, the truth that's in others, and we will find a way to converge. There has to be like an evolution.
wow, that's incredible. But beware of deception. When you were talking about the woman stealing the clothes, I was thinking of Alice in Wonderland, where everything would be what it isn't and what it would be, it wouldn't. Living the complete opposite of the truth. And in the religions that are waiting for the return of Christ, they're also worried about the false Christ, the Antichrist, who will impersonate Christ, but of course he won't be the true one, and only the real believers will be able to tell the difference. So yeah, the truth will
Right.
out, as they say.
The truth is always open. It's always tentative. It's always uncertain. It's always open. And a lot of people can't deal with uncertainty. They need definitions. They need facts. They need control. And when they need it for themselves, then they also feel the need to project that onto other people. And unfortunately, that's not a good state of affairs. I am very mindful, very vigilant of the need in me to control, and I tend to be hyper vigilant of that tendency.
Yeah, I think we, as you say, we need it. We want an answer. We want a simple answer. I was hoping earlier on that you would just say, "Oh yeah, it's aliens," very simply, or "No, it's God and they're angels." But the truth might be somewhere in between, or it might be something we can't even comprehend. We can't even
Right, right.
conceive of. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of the religious stories are metaphors and parables for things we cannot comprehend, but people would rather have it in black and white and say, oh no, it says throne, God sits on a throne, he sits on a big chair, seated at God's right hand. Well, he's got a hand. Whereas this is just language that can only go so far to help us understand something or have a concept of it. Psychedelic drugs might go a step further, but to understand a concept like God that is infinite, you will never truly get there. It will be an ever advancing journey, closer and closer and closer, but you'll never actually get there unless you reach nirvana, as Buddha claimed to have done.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Seb, go on for that. We just got a comment from Triple T. If aliens exist, God exists, I bet. Probably.
He's sorry. The person said, "What? Could you repeat that?"
He's saying if aliens exist, God exists, I bet.
Yeah, that to me, aliens would just be a confirmation that there's a much larger picture. That we're simply just like one fractal subset in infinite sets and sets and sets of information, and that would
But
also put a huge.
And one wouldn't negate the other. You're not saying that the gods in the Bible or God is just got confused with aliens. There is a one supreme being, and he created many beings that might include other life forms that would be alien to us.
Yeah. It would increase our awareness of the universe. It would minimize our hubris, our arrogance, and it would make us realize that there's infinite perspectives, that there are infinite levels of consciousness, not only on our planet but in the whole universe.
That's right. And for example, in the Quran, God is described as Lord of all the worlds, not the world, all the worlds.
Right.
So the religious books are open to this sort of interpretation. But it's been a great chat, yet another great chat, Seb. Where are we going with this next time? Give us a little teaser of what you want to talk about next time we do this. What direction do you think we can go in?
Little teaser. What could we inject into the punch bowl? I think we need to dilute all the Kool-Aids of the world and just create this funky concoction that's like that big Kool-Aid jar. I always thought that he was like this maniac that I always identified with him when I was a kid. Remember the Kool-Aid jar with the weird smile? So I always wanted to recreate that energy. And I want to take it someplace fun, less intellectual, maybe some creative, throw some like little fractals of energy out there that might excite our electrons.
Superb. All right. Well, next time we'll go a little bit creative. Triple T is saying perhaps this is why the UFOs are being hidden from us by the governments. They don't want us to be religious. Maybe if we found out the truth, we would all become spiritual and wouldn't follow their instructions. I don't know. Who knows what governments do behind closed doors? Well, look, Seb, thank you so much for joining me again.
Thanks a lot.
And we will do it again very soon. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
You too, brother. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.